Caster Aaron Mayowski. This is KUOW News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include DuckDuckGo, committed to making privacy online simple. Used by tens of millions, they offer internet privacy with one download. DuckDuckGo, privacy simplified at duckduckgo.com.
Welcome to Friday. Welcome to KUOW's Week in Review. Just to recap, this is what we do on Fridays to get together, have a little community with some local journalists who have been watching the news just like you, but more so. And we know a little something. And if we don't know, we go find out. And on Fridays for an hour, we let you know what happened this week and what it means. And by our panel of journalists this week, I mean independent journalist Jane C. Hu. Jane, thanks for coming back on. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Bill.
And from Insider, tech correspondent Katherine Long. Katherine, great to see you. Thanks.
Hey, thanks, Bill.
And Puget Sound Business Journal editor-in-chief Ryan Lambert. Ryan, great to see you.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Looks like at least some of you are working from home. Are you air conditioned? I don't suppose.
James? I wish.
Yeah. Well, looks like you're going to need it with a little heat wave coming up. Upper 80s on Monday, mid to upper 90s on Tuesday and Wednesday. Although if you lived through last year, your iron has already been forged. Some head nodding here.
Yeah, that's right. I think expectations really changed after last year. I'm looking for a roommate now, and every single person who has called to ask me about my place has demanded whether I have AC. I do not. I think that's losing me a lot of interest.
That rent is dropping, perhaps.
Yeah, got to slash rents.
That's really interesting, AC. Katherine, because I, as a long timer, that was not something that would have happened, many years ago.
Yeah, I think after last year, folks really got it in their heads that it's going to be hard to tough it out in the summers here without AC going forward.
Well, that might be the best perk employers can provide is office AC. That's the best way to get workers back into the office these days, right?
It's true. I recently joined a co-working space, and I have been ducking over there on days that it's kind of hot, just to avoid sweltering and trying to, work while sweaty.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's going to come up later in the show, of course, is some local corporations cutting back on hiring and the effect of remote work. Meanwhile, we're bracing for heat here, but our state drought was declared over this week. The state drought coordinator, Jeff Marty, says after the third wettest spring on record, we are now considered to be in a normal condition in Washington, even if this summer from here on out is dry and hot.
We had a really good snowpack, and it's still melting away in parts of the state. So there's just a really good foundation in terms of water supply and soil moisture, but we wouldn't expect, say, a dry stretch in July and August to really change the game that much.
So Jane, that sounds like good news, right?
Overall, I think yes. Definitely prefer to not be in drought than to be in drought. I think a lot of folks hope that means we'll have a more relaxed fire season. Unfortunately, I think the jury is still out on that. So Hannah Weinberger did a great piece for Crosscut last month about how, though you might think that more rain helps with reducing wildfire risk, it actually might not help in the long run, because more rain means that more weeds can grow. And in particular, cheatgrass is very flammable. And we've had a pretty wet spring. A lot of that has grown. A lot of it has dried out. So we might not quite be out of the woods yet in terms of reducing fire risk.
Ugh, cheatgrass. It's one of those plants where the name is really descriptive.
Right. It helps you make a villain out of it, which it might be in effect. Yeah. And so even if the fire season's a big open question. And then last year, as I recall, the smoke from the fires we did have was not as bad as feared.
Yeah, I think that we somehow lucked out and did not get the worst of it. I remember going on a road trip last summer, and it felt like basically everything east of here was much worse than here. And I mean, I think this is just something we're going to come to expect year after year here, that smoke season is a thing. And I think last year really showed how even if the fire is not close to where we are, smoke can still impact you in a big way. Like I remember, I am originally from Kentucky, and a lot of my friends in Kentucky were like, why are all our skies kind of weird and hazy? And it turns out it was all West Coast fires that had just made it all the way to the East Coast.
Wow, we are the cheatgrass of American regions, frustrating other people. Did you hear that Eddie Vedder had to cancel a show because he said his vocal cords got damaged by smoke in Europe?
Yeah, I did not read beyond the headline, but hopefully that's not permanent.
Let's hope not. I mean, I think a smoky sound kind of suits him. But yes, let's hope he's all in good health. Ryan, anything to add? Making any preparations? Any expectations?
No, I'm interested to hear from Eddie Vedder though. That's
yeah. Well, he'll be a guest soon. He's a big fan of the show. Okay, let's take a pause, and since we briefly brought up hiring plans and the beauty of an air-conditioned workspace, let's talk about what Amazon and Microsoft are saying about at least slowing growth and how permanent that might be and why that's happening. And then a fascinating back and forth when it comes to our tech culture and our art culture. A great topic that we're going to tackle in just a moment as Week in Review continues. I should mention, if I haven't, that you can watch the show because we're live streaming it all on YouTube and Facebook. You just search KUOW Public Radio. So we'll see you over there, and we'll talk to you in a moment after a quick break.
You are listening to Week in Review on 94.9 KUOW, Seattle's NPR news station. It's 12:13. Currently 66 degrees in Seattle, where our expected high for today is 74, and sun is in the forecast for this afternoon.
Hi, it's Ari Shapiro. On All Things Considered, we bring you stories that are interesting but not predictable.
Scientists have recorded a song made by a volcano.
One man has found solace tending to his pigeons.
One of the things I love about ice cream is it's never a bad time for it.
Listen to All Things Considered from NPR every afternoon.
Support for KUOW comes from Washington Generators, installing and maintaining home backup power solutions, including Generac home standby generators and renewable energy options such as solar and battery storage. More information at washingtongenerators.com.
You are with KUOW's Week in Review, and with you, breaking down the news, are insider tech correspondent Katherine Long, Puget Sound Business Journal editor-in-chief Ryan Lambert, and independent journalist Jane C. Hu. And I'm Bill Radke. The growth of jobs in this region stops for nothing. At least that's what it has seemed like. Even through the pandemic, companies have been building new skyscrapers and campuses and hiring and hiring and hiring. That is finally moderating among at least the most visible companies. Microsoft says it's slowing its hiring. Google and Apple are big here, and they're doing the same. Amazon is pausing work on most office towers in Bellevue. Business journalist Ryan Lambert, why is this happening?
Well, I think you got to take it back a couple of years. In 2020 and 2021, a lot of these companies were just experiencing this record growth over the course of, the expansion of e-commerce and the heightened cloud computing, and certainly of the advances in sort of remote work. And you just saw this amazing growth, and it wasn't, specific to Amazon or to Microsoft. It was really spreading to all these companies. And you saw it, even at the smaller scale, sort of in the VC world, there was just a lot of capital flowing to small and mid-sized tech companies. Well, it was only a matter of time before that sort of leveled off. The music is, if it's not stopped, it is certainly slowing down. People are looking for their chairs. And I think what's happening is, companies are starting to better calibrate what their plans are and what the current market is looking like. One of the questions that was constantly coming up to me over the last 2 years, as a lot of companies, particularly tech companies, were moving toward remote work, and they were pulling back from the office. Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Facebook, they were investing more and more into real estate spaces and office spaces.
Right.
And my question was, well, what do they know that the rest of us don't? And I never got a clear answer from that, and you're never going to get a clear answer from a broker, because they're kind of cheerleaders for the commercial real estate community. And what we've seen and what we've sort of analyzed is take a look at where that growth is happening. Google has made major investments in Kirkland. They're opening several offices and have a couple of offices planned in that area. Facebook moved in late 2020, bought up a space that had been designated as REI's headquarters, as REI said, you know what, we're done with this headquarter idea. We're just going to go completely remote.
Right. That was fascinating.
Yeah. And then, of course, you have Microsoft with this massive expansion of their headquarters campus in Redmond. They're also developing a hub out in Atlanta. And then, of course, you have Amazon essentially setting up an HQ2 in Bellevue. I mean, what they're doing in Bellevue rivals, at least from an employee count, anything that they're doing in Washington, D.C. So why is all this investment in real estate activity happening in those suburban areas? Well, you got to look at sort of the hiring market. And one of the most coveted workers in the tech hiring pool right now is senior software engineers. Those senior engineers are typically homeowners or aspiring homeowners. They have families. They are living in sort of that suburban setting, or they want to live in suburban settings. So that is where tech companies are kind of looking to position themselves to make it more convenient to attract those type of workers. And when you talk about, the escalating salaries in tech, a lot of times those top end salaries are going toward those senior software engineers. So I think that is sort of what you saw that got us to this point. And now you're seeing a lot of that slow down, and workers aren't as eager to get back to the office. And talking to a couple of the people at Amazon, this had been in the works for a while, kind of looking at, all right, this is what we thought our office space in Bellevue was going to be back when we were sort of devising this plan in 2019. This is not the case. We have to kind of rethink how we're using all this office space. And that's kind of where we're at right now. It's sort of a moment to stop and reflect and figure out where this is going. But Katherine, I'm sure you've been following this. Sort of, what are you seeing?
I mean, what strikes me about the situation is it just seems like a big blow to Bellevue. They've got these huge towers now sitting vacant for an unknown period of time. And a couple of years ago, when Amazon announced that they were going to put 25,000 people in Bellevue looked like it was sitting pretty. There was all this noise about Amazon being disgruntled about the payroll tax, and Bellevue being better positioned to be a real home for Amazon. It had a much more business friendly climate, and I feel for the folks in Bellevue now that Amazon has paused growth there. But I think you're right on the money when it comes to Amazon and Microsoft's expansion plans being targeted towards attracting, what these companies are seeing as the most valued workers, or the top level independent contributors, the middle managers. These are the people who have really been in position to demand higher salaries since the start of the pandemic. We've seen this great reshuffling, those folks hopping from company to company, leveraging offers, and it's been a really hot market for jobs. I think there's certainly been pullback in that lately.
I want to hear from Jane, but Katherine, just one question on a point you made when you talk about, boy, it's got to be tough news for Bellevue. That some people are hearing that thinking, do you mean good news? I mean, we've been complaining about the growth for years now.
Yeah, I think it's certainly a double-edged sword. I mean, even recently, Bellevue, I know was looking at Amazon's expansion plans and rethinking, saying, we thought we wanted this, but wait a second, this is going to be a lot of people. Are we sure we're prepared for this? I think it's also possible it could come as a welcome pause for them to rethink some of their infrastructure in that city as Amazon resets.
Yeah, a moment of slowing down seems like it would do the market some good right now, just to sort of assess what the future of office space looks like. And Amazon is beyond the office space. They've made so many commitments to the infrastructure in Bellevue, to a lot of affordable housing measures in Bellevue and things like that. So Amazon seems very much committed to that presence in Bellevue. And if we just want to look at the brief history of Bellevue, go back a couple of years when Expedia left. Expedia was one of the largest employers in Bellevue, and they pulled up stakes and moved out to Seattle and Interbay. There was a lot of hand wringing at that time about who would move in, who would take the spot, and now it's seemingly bigger and better than ever in terms of having these large employers come in with big high-paying jobs into the area. So I wouldn't count out Bellevue just yet, but it is certainly a moment to sort of sit back and reflect. And we talked to Bellevue Mayor Lynn Robinson earlier this week, and they're kind of saying, okay, this could be a good thing, and that take that for what it's worth, but that is kind of the position of Bellevue City Council. So
wondering how long these effects will last. I think everyone's really starting to embrace working from home. As someone who worked from home starting in 2017, I've been doing this for a while, and I recently reached kind of a breaking point after 5 years of working out of my house where I just need to be out of here as much as possible. And I'm sure the pandemic didn't help with that. Mm-hmm. I imagine if you have children at home, in particular, the working from home thing is going to get old. And I wonder what the downstream effects are. So for now, folks are moving out of these office buildings, and it seems like largely working from home, but I wonder, is that going to, increase demand for a minimum 2 or 3 bedroom apartment or house so that people actually have a dedicated space for that? Or I guess in a lot of cases, are folks going to move out of this area and into more rural areas or just other cities or towns in the West altogether if their work truly allows them to be fully remote?
Yeah, I mean, I would look at some of the tech companies moving into particularly Bellevue, Redmond, and Kirkland, and frankly, they are at the high end of the pay scale. You saw Amazon and Microsoft both bump up their pay scales to compete with Google and Facebook. Particularly Facebook, we heard was driving up a lot of the compensation for some of this tech talent. So I think when you're paying somebody that much and you're saying, well, you can make, $250,000 a year and, come into the office when we ask you, or you could make, 75 to 100,000 less and work from home. I think that's a decision, a lot of tech workers are going to have to make at a certain point. And, this week we've seen a whole spate of tech layoffs at smaller companies. A lot of unicorn companies or companies valued at over $1 billion. So you are seeing a slowdown, throughout the tech community, and that has manifested with layoffs at some of those smaller companies, but not yet for the larger tech companies.
We got a couple of comments in our community feedback club. I asked about this, and Alex in West. I basically asked good news or bad news. This slowdown, and Alex in West Seattle said, I owned a small landscaping company, and 95% of my clients work for either Amazon or Microsoft. They pay very well, and in return, I pay my workers very well too. Slowing is okay, but if they start shrinking, that is when I will worry. If I were to lose those deep pocket clients, then I would have to either cut perks or let go some of my workers. So there's a reminder of the so-called trickle-down effects, or the spreading effect of money, that it's not just about one rich group of people. And then one more comment. This listener says, "This is good news. Time to be realistic about sustainable growth and put our sights on parts of our society that need growing. Real mental health resources, socialized healthcare, housing, climate resilience. Stop obsessing like it's 1995 about economic growth of corporations. We should redefine what we mean by economy, and it should include our well-being and that of our neighbors." Let me ask about, since we brought up the tax, the Jumpstart tax that Amazon and some other big well-paying companies pay in Seattle, but not in Bellevue. This is one reason that the hiring of Seattle corporations matters. Is we heard the reaction about a landscaper, but also there's the fact that this money, this tax revenue on every employee making at least $150,000 a year at these big companies, that goes to fund services in the city of Seattle. And this week, the city got its first look at how that money is going to be divided up. So what did we learn? I can't remember. One of us knows the most about that. Well, what did we learn this week about where that Jumpstart money's going?
So the Jumpstart tax generated $234 million. Less than half of that is going to go towards affordable housing. A huge chunk of it is going to go into the city's general fund, including to pay for things like COVID-19 related expenses. And I think that listener made some nuanced points. I think that the growth of large corporations, especially Amazon and Seattle, have always had an impact on housing costs, on livability, on affordability. And the Jumpstart tax formalized that relationship and made it codependent in a sense, so that Amazon's growth is directly tied to the city's ability to pay for some of these most necessary services.
Yeah, certainly the fascinating thing about the Jumpstart tax, and there's been a lot of question over how much these funds would actually help what they were sort of designed to address. They've actually exceeded expectations, and in year one they've raised $234 million in revenue for the city of Seattle. And of course, we said about $85 million of that went to the city's general fund, and about $97 million went toward housing. I think the interesting thing here is sort of the iterations that came before the Jumpstart tax were, kind of framed as the tax Amazon. It was very much targeted at Amazon, and has about 55,000 employees at its corporate offices in Seattle, and many of them would sort of fall under the parameters of that Jumpstart tax. And so we've been looking at that very closely, and I think one of the really interesting things to note here is that Amazon's investments in affordable housing have kind of coincided with the introduction of the Jumpstart tax. Amazon says since January 2021, it has invested about $344 million into affordable housing in the Puget Sound region to either preserve or create units. And they say it's about 2,800 units that they've preserved or created. And about 1,100 of those units are in Bellevue. And that's what I find so interesting, that a lot of the Amazon's investments have been targeted in Bellevue. They made a big $2 billion national commitment to affordable housing. And that commitment was targeted in Washington, D.C., Nashville, and in Bellevue. And sort of my takeaway from that was this is Amazon sort of saying we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way, but we're going to do it our way if we're going to do it. If we're going to do it at all. So Amazon has put a lot of money toward affordable housing, but they've certainly done it on their terms. And it was interesting to see that their investments outside of the Seattle's Jumpstart tax were much larger than what's actually generated by the Jumpstart tax.
So did what we learned this week tell us anything about the future? This tax has been controversial and contested. Do we know anything more now about the future of the Jumpstart tax?
I think that is a great question, and one that I don't think a lot of our city leaders in Seattle can answer, just because they don't know what's happening with the budget moving forward. It took us 6 months into 2022 to actually figure out where the funds were going and how much was actually going toward housing. I think it'll get progressively better over time as we recover from the pandemic and get into the recovery, and perhaps through a recession. But right now, a lot of those funds are being sort of redirected to help the city in other ways. It's quite clear, talking to a couple of city council members and officials in the budget office, that the city needs more revenue, and they need to find more ways to generate revenue and create revenue streams. So I think this might not be the end of it, in terms of different taxes, but it is certainly going to help a lot more as we get closer and closer to that recovery.
Now that we know the budget distribution, has there been any response from companies that are affected by this tax?
Not yet. They're all just kind of sitting tight. It was interesting, the timing around sort of that announcement that, shortly after we published the story, saying that less than half of the Jumpstart Tax is actually going toward housing, that Amazon right around that time came out with its sort of big report on how much it has invested in affordable housing around the Puget Sound region. So, and just talking to folks at Amazon, they are hyper aware of sort of their relationship with the city of Seattle. They would like that to improve, and they want to be seen in every way as sort of a good partner with the cities that they're in.
So they didn't come out and say, "Oh, this tax to pay for affordable housing. What do you know? Turns out it goes to the general fund."
They didn't exactly say that, but what they did say is we've certainly made investments. Look at all the great work we've done in Bellevue, and by the way, just a big thank you to all the city council members in Bellevue who made this possible. So
right. And it was, I think, what did you say, Katherine? Something almost $100 million did go to housing projects.
97 million.
97 million, and some of it gets peeled off for general fund use, at least during, isn't that just a short-term thing? If only the pandemic were short-term, but I think that was a 2-year stipulation, right, for COVID relief.
Yeah, 2-year stipulation to top off the general fund, and then after that, I think 62% of the revenue generated from the Jumpstart Tax will go toward housing. And so, like I said, it's designed to improve and be more beneficial over time.
Right. All right. Before we leave Amazon and Microsoft and the effects of their growth, the money that these corporations pay from this payroll tax, we talked about it funding city projects. Also, the money that they pay their workers makes the cost of living go up for everybody, including artists. This has been a great tension. And this week, that tension flared over because of a new art exhibit. There was a public backlash to an exhibit planned on First Hill at the Museum of Museums. Katherine, will you describe what happened there?
This art show was called Amazon versus Microsoft, and it was intended to highlight art from employees of both of those corporations, trying to perhaps recast some of our tech worker denizens as creative figures, reframe how people in Seattle see them. But there was a swift negative reaction on social media to this art show.
Katherine, may I ask you, what kind of art are we talking about? What art do tech workers create that the exhibit was getting at?
I'm not actually sure. Maybe somebody else has a better idea, but I was under the impression there was an open call for art submissions from tech workers, and I'm not sure that it was confined to a specific medium. Mm-hmm. I think it could have taken a variety of forms.
Okay.
But the reaction to this was negative. Folks saying, you have this museum space. You could choose to uplift anybody, and you chose tech workers, people who are some of the most privileged residents in Seattle. And we can argue about that. Obviously, there are employees for Seattle and for Amazon and Microsoft that are not paid very much. Contract workers, warehouse workers, video game developers, people who have strong artistic backgrounds and tendencies, and maybe work for tech companies because they couldn't make a go of it financially in the art world. But the museum curator yanked the show, said we're not going to do this anymore, and it's on the back burner. I mean, I really see this story as sort of a sigil for how the city is grappling with the impact of tech giants. We've seen a lot of discussion over the past decade about the extent to which tech employment and tech growth in Seattle has decimated Seattle's arts community. This really seems sort of like a watershed moment in that debate.
I think the reflection of how people just assume that art and tech are somehow diametrically opposed from each other. And I mean, I know people who have worked at tech companies largely as contractors. So, you know, not the full-time folks with all the nice benefits making $200K a year, you know, they have worked those jobs as a way to save up money so that they can do their art. And if I remember correctly, I think Greg Lundgren's original post announcing this exhibit specifically mentioned folks who are, you know, working on an hourly basis, who aren't the most privileged and well-resourced folks who work at those companies. And I think there's a real opportunity to try and highlight those artists that could really give them a boost in their career. But I can also see exactly why this would touch off a nerve with folks, especially working artists who are trying to compete with folks who are making so much money a year. I know a lot of artists who are struggling to stay in this area. But what I wonder is, you know, with all of the resources of these companies, is there a way that they could channel that in some way? Like, could Amazon or Microsoft hold their own show? Or I guess even better, maybe treat those employees better. But that's a bigger question.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's interesting. You actually say that. Yeah, it wasn't a couple of months ago. Back in May, we wrote a story about how Amazon has a whole program, you know, set up to sort of commission artists and support artwork and things like that. So, you know, these companies are very much involved. I was just sort of struck by the headline, "Artists Against Art." I didn't understand that.
Well, yeah, I part of it is the intention. I'm still not crystal clear on the intention of the curator, the person who runs this museum, because at one point he said the strongest arts museum, the strongest arts ecosystem is also the most inclusive one, tech bros included, poor people, rich people, people with shared ideals, and people with strange ideas, everyone, which makes it sound like creating a dialogue and getting beyond our stereotypes of tech bros. But then he also said, I want artists to make more money. I want artists to call Seattle home. I want to help give them enough opportunity, visibility, support, community to stick around. That requires building a larger patronage, a larger network to support them. And rightly or wrongly, I thought that the most mighty economic engine to support local art was the tens of thousands of people employed by high tech in the city, which makes it sound like, as he says, rightly or wrongly, he wanted to tap into the money that rich tech workers could use to buy art. So was that also setting people off, not just the income inequality, but the idea of, I don't know, cozying up to tech companies to get their money? What was your take on what the intention was?
My impression is that the museum had several simultaneous intentions.
Yeah.
What you said, obviously, to, you know, cozying up to the tech community, cultivating them maybe as patrons of the art world, which is a dynamic that is present in the art world. You know, artists need money, and who is going to pay for art? Typically wealthier people. So I don't think we need to be coy about that. Bringing some of these talented artists, who I'm sure work for tech companies, to light, giving them a wider audience. And I think also, I think the exhibit was intended to be a little provocative. You know, when you got a title like Amazon v. Microsoft, the Museum of Museums is somewhat new. I think they saw this as a good way to raise some awareness of their mission.
Yeah, well put. Well, we'll see if this is. I had the sense from the owner of the museum that this may not be the end of it. It's the end of this concept. The boxing glove, that was a riff on the old Warhol Basquiat in boxing gloves icon from decades ago. But this idea of Amazon versus Microsoft sounds like it didn't fly, and it didn't fly, and it did die. But maybe there's a chance. I mean, we did get a dialogue going. We're talking about it right now. There was a great piece in Crosscut, I thought, about this whole topic and this tension, lots of different point of views. So maybe there's room for some of you brought up the idea of an Amazon curated artwork, or just panel discussions about this very tension. Maybe the topic is not completely canceled. Maybe it didn't get canceled. Maybe it'll just get changed.
I mean, I would love to go to this art exhibit. I would love to see art that has been created by a wide range of Amazon and Microsoft employees. These are residents of our city, and they're not just tech bros. I would love to see what kind of art they create.
I think there's a lot of promise in the idea, but obviously it requires thought and discussion to really do well.
I would imagine it's certainly gotten more attention now that it's not happening than it would have gotten if it just had gone through without a hitch.
Maybe. This idea you're saying, I would have liked to see, that was my first reaction was, well, I'm not an artist and I'm not a tech bro. I'm just someone who might have gone to this exhibit. And so did an exhibit get taken away just because this of some factionalism, the growth and the tech growth means that life is harder for artists. Therefore, people who would like to see this exhibit don't get to.
I think some of the critique was certainly valid. I think space for art is limited, and I think as an institution that is focused on providing a space for artists, I think the Museum of Museums. It's incumbent upon them to think critically about what kind of art they invite into their space. I would love to see this exhibit occur in an Amazon office that was maybe open to the public. Amazon has, as Ryan mentioned, Amazon does have a commitment to art, and they certainly do seem to be reckoning with their impact on the city. I'm thinking about their pink elephant. They're saving of the pink elephant car wash sign and putting it adjacent to an Amazon property. I think that having an exhibit like this would, align with those sorts of actions on Amazon's part.
Right. All right. Let's take a pause here. It's KOW's Week in Review. Always looking for a wealthy patron for our show, so feel free. Chip in. There's the pink elephant in the room. We've got Katherine Long here from Insider, and Jane C. Hu, independent journalist, and we've got Puget Sound business journalist Ryan Lambert streaming the show on Facebook and YouTube. And as I say, quick break, and we're going to come back and figure out what happened around some King County drop boxes. What can you say around a drop box? Is this voter intimidation? Stay tuned.
At KUOW, we're here to help you make sense of what's going on and maybe even provide a little inspiration and delight along the way. If you listen but have never supported KUOW, we invite you to make a gift, or better yet, join as a monthly member today. Listener contributions make everything you hear on air and read online possible at KUOW. Please make a gift online at kuow.org/donate. Thanks.
I'm Julian Marshall, host of BBC Newsarm. On today's program, Russia and Ukraine have signed agreements for the resumption of vital grain exports from blockaded Ukrainian ports. We'll hear from Moscow and Kiev. And the shocking testimony of a group of soldiers in Myanmar who defected after they were ordered to murder and rape civilians.
Those stories and more today during BBC NewsHour. It begins at 1 p.m. right after Week in Review on 94.9 KUOW, Seattle's NPR news station, and KUOW.org. 67 degrees in Seattle now. We expect to reach 74 today with sun. It's 12:45.
Support for KUOW comes from the Museum of Flight, presenting the Walt Disney Studios and World War II, a new exhibition showing how the studio changed itself and popular culture to help America win the war. With over 500 objects and films, now open info@museumofflight.org.
You're listening to KUOW's Week in Review. You can actually be part of the show. As you heard, I read the comments of a couple of thoughtful listeners on the topic of growth and slowing growth in this region. If you ever want to participate in that way, join our community feedback club. And here's how to do it. You text the word sound to the number 206-926-9955. Again, text the word sound to 206-926-9955. You can also always go to kuow.org/feedback. So we are breaking down the news of the week for you. By us, I mean we journalists. We've got Jane C. Hu here and Ryan Lambert and Katherine Long. And this week, we're in primary election season. You can mail or drop off your ballot now. But what if you don't feel comfortable dropping your ballot because of what's happening nearby? Some signs have gone up near some local drop boxes saying that those boxes are under surveillance and that it's illegal to accept money for harvesting or depositing ballots. And please report suspicious activity here. And there's a QR code that links to a King County Republican Party website. Jane, do we know who's posting these signs and why?
I have seen reporting that this is associated with the Washington GOP. I think that the actual individuals who are involved with this are not yet known. And it seems like there's just a lot of open questions about what these people's intentions are, whether what they have done or what they're encouraging people to do is legal, and what overall effect this is going to have on voters' openness to using those drop-off boxes.
Yeah, I've seen some, the state GOP has sort of disavowed the signs, and the King County GOP has explicitly done that and asked them to be taken down. But some of the individual Republicans involved and who said that volunteers put these signs up say that this is supposed to act as a deterrent to anybody getting paid to deliver ballots. And one of them said, if they're legally dropping ballots into the box, then the sign shouldn't bother them. But some people are bothered. So are the signs clearly illegal?
Seems pretty open. So I know that King County Elections has asked the sheriff's office to investigate this, whether this could be some form of voter intimidation. And what I've read about voter intimidation seems very designed around traditional voting practices where folks go to a polling location and vote in a booth and leave. Whereas here in Washington, we've got these wonderful drop boxes, and that feels like a slightly different situation than what a lot of folks elsewhere in the country do. But you can definitely see from looking at what are examples of voter intimidation, how that could carry over into having someone surveil a site. So it seems like, the signs themselves are encouraging folks to sign up for these shifts to watch the boxes. But what they actually do on their shifts, I think, would really determine whether that constitutes voter intimidation. So things that are voter intimidation include following voters to, from, or within a polling place. And arguably, if you're just sitting there, is that okay? If you're actively trying to follow them and watch them, maybe that crosses the line. Or harassing voters, so aggressively questioning them about their qualifications to vote, or asking, who they are, what business they have. I think what constitutes harassment is a little bit squishy there. But yeah, I think that in coming weeks, we will hopefully get some more clarity on whether these signs are able to be left up, and what folks are going to do about that in the long run.
I think we really need to put these signs in the context of, a nationwide conservative conspiracy theory that our local elections are fraudulent, which there is no evidence to suggest that they are fraudulent at large scale. Earlier this week, prominent Republicans, former Attorney General Bill Barr, Karl Rove, they announced that they launched this nonprofit group that's going to launch legal challenges to local elections nationwide, again, contesting that those elections are fraudulent. And that's the narrative that these signs are trying to promulgate. Our King County elections are well run, they are safe. These signs imply the opposite. And they're encouraging a sort of vigilantism that I think is dangerous. I don't know, Bill, if you mentioned already that when people use the QR code to look at the group's website on the signs, they're reminded that it's legal to carry guns near voting places. I think in the context of widespread gun violence, that could be construed as potentially intimidating. But it remains to be seen whether the signs dissuaded any voters from dropping off their ballots.
Absolutely. And the Institute for Research and Education on Human Rights, which is actually based here in Seattle, has been following a lot of far-right and militia groups' actions. And so what's happening here is really, like Katherine said, part of this nationwide effort to try and discredit local elections and just election results in general, and playing into this narrative that there's a lot of fraud and that it needs to be watched.
And it might be tricky to know what's okay and what's not. In Washington State, you can give your ballot to a family member, for example, and we can have ballot parties where people collect a bunch of votes and turn them in together. The signatures all get checked before they're counted, but that's not illegal. But when if there's a sign talking about surveillance, you might start to wonder, what am I going to get hassled for? But as you say, are the signs informative? Are they intimidating? I don't know who's going to decide. We're right, with the election, the election ballots are due. I think it's August 2nd. So I don't know whether someone's going to just pull up signs. I don't know whether people are already just taking it. Jane is nodding. Some people are already just removing the signs themselves.
Oh, yes. If you check out the Seattle subreddit, there are definitely folks who at least claim to have removed the signs, or at least they've taken the signs and put them next to trash cans, suggesting that they have pulled the signs themselves and removed them. I also have seen, I haven't not actually seen in person whether or not anyone has actually done this, but there have been suggestions of folks replacing the QR codes to lead to something more fun or sometimes sinister. But I think on the fun end of the range, having a QR code instead of going to this website that you can sign up to watch one of these ballot boxes, instead it's a Rickroll.
Is it legal to tamper with or remove someone's sign when the sign has not been determined to be illegal?
If not illegal, it's certainly, I'm sure, the original folks who put up the signs won't be thrilled about it. But in the same way that we're not sure exactly who put up the signs, I think the folks who are thinking about modifying signs are relying on anonymity.
Yeah. Okay. Well, again, even the King County GOP chair has disavowed and called for the removal of the signs. Okay. Anything more to say about that before we turn to any reason to smile? I cling to that last segment of the show sometimes. What has made my guests hopeful or just pleased this week that you want to pass on to us?
Well, I'll just say, to piggyback on what Jane and Katherine said, instances of voter fraud are very rare. So that is one thing we're doing very well. Way to go, America. The other thing that made me smile earlier this week, Monday, we all got to see Julio Rodriguez, the Mariners' star rookie center fielder, in the home run derby. If you didn't see that, he put on an awesome show. Really opened up a lot of eyes around the country to folks who weren't paying attention to Mariners baseball. And they start up again today, try to continue that 14-game winning streak against the Astros, the villainous Astros there. So I'm really looking forward to that. Been keeping a smile on my face for the last 2 weeks. Hope we can carry it through.
Aren't the Houston Astros the cheat grass of the Major League Baseball?
something like that, or cheatgrass, trash can, whatever they were banging at the time. Yeah.
Or was that another team? Somebody cheated. I remember stole signs and stole signals.
Oh, that was the Astros. Yeah.
Oh, that was definitely Astros. Okay, so do you think that a layoff ruins the winning streak? Ruins all the momentum.
Oh golly, I hope not. I think they were all ready for a rest. They got Kyle Lewis, their former Rookie of the Year, coming back. So things are looking good, and it sounds like they're going to have a sellout crowd or close to a sellout crowd tonight. So Soto Mojo, right?
Yeah. Soto Mojo. How about you, Katherine? I'm sorry about the cheat grass. I know you were telling me that you were fist shaking at the cheat grass. So on the positive side, Katherine, what made you smile this week?
Well, with the news that we're going to have some hotter weather in this upcoming week, I was reflecting back to our heat dome last year. I was remembering, what seemed like a sort of a cataclysmic series of events. We had super hot weather, and we also were still battling this Asian giant hornet, the murder hornet. And it made me think, I haven't thought about murder hornets for a year. Where are those? Where are those bad guys? And it turns out there haven't been any confirmed sightings of them this year. So I'm smiling about an absence of something. I'm smiling that so far the Asian giant hornets seem to be staying underground or at least out of sight. Hopefully they're gone for good.
Do you know why? Do they hate the heat dome? What happened to the hornets? I'd forgotten about them myself.
There have been eradication efforts. I think those have been pretty successful. I suspect we might see a few more, but knock on wood, won't be for a while.
They're wherever the wildfire smoke is, and they can stay there. Jane, anything to add before we say so long?
I have just been loving my summer CSA box from Collins Orchards. Want to give them a shout out. But
community supported agriculture.
Yes, community supported agriculture. I just get a little box every week, just down the street at my neighbor's house. You pick it up from their porch, and it is full of cherries and apricots and peaches, and everything is just wonderful right now.
I feel so much better. Yeah, let's hear it for the stone fruit. I want to thank my stone cold, qualified, and likable journalists who make a show every week. That's what I'm grateful for, that we have Jane C. Hu and Katherine Long from Insider, the tech correspondent there, and from Puget Sound Business Journal, editor-in-chief Ryan Lambert. Thanks for being the show. I hope you have a fantastic weekend and do what you can with the heat. Be aware that the sometimes that refreshing water is colder than you think. And thanks again, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
And thank you to Kevin Kniestedt, who produces this program, and to Tio Popescu and Juan Pablo Chiquiza. They make the social media and the live streaming happen. And if you just caught the end of the show, so what else was there? This show is a podcast. You join us all the time, wherever you get your podcasts. The show's called Week in Review. We've got a new podcast for you called KUOW Shorts. Right now, there's a series up called Blue Suits that I recommend from Shin Yi Pai. Join us online, join us on podcast. Drop in when we're live streaming shows on YouTube and Facebook, and we'll join us again on the radio in a week for Week in Review. I'm Bill Radke. Have a great weekend. Team, that went by really fast. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bill. Great show. Easy.
I wanted to get to Nobody Works on Friday. I still maybe.
Yes, I wanted to get that in too.
And that's my fault. I was eyeing the clock. I'm doing my in the moment clock management, but it's a good topic, and maybe we'll talk about it some other time. But I'm still was unclear from reading the Washington Post story. When you say the headline was nobody wants to be in the office Friday, do you mean nobody wants to work on Friday, or like? And you're not in the office. People want to work remotely on Friday, or they want to pretend they're working, but if they're not in their office, their boss won't know they're not working.
I think it's that one.
I kind of think so.
Yeah. I've gotten pretty good at ending my Fridays at 3 p.m. now that I'm not in the office.
Yeah, it helps.
I was going to say, judging from our website traffic, which tanks at about 1 o'clock on Friday, I would say most people are taking off on Friday. Yeah.
Oh, that's a good. Yeah, that's a good. There's some data around this, right?
That's a good indicator. Yeah.
Good point. All right. Well, maybe next time. Thanks, everybody. Great job. And it's
Thanks,
been a
y'all. Have a
pleasure.
great weekend.
Thanks for doing
Thanks,
the show.
everyone. Take
See you
care.
guys.
Bye.
Thank you.